Debate start.
Oke, bentar ya, jangan dimulai dulu. Wait a second.
Halo, tes.
Yes. Wait a minute ya. Sorry.
Oke, Kak.
Halo.
Iya,
Yes.
Dap.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Oke.
Sabar.
Tadi agak putus-putus soalnya.
Jangan mulai dulu katanya.
Jangan dimulai dulu ya, bentar
Oh,
ya.
Oke.
Okay, you may start now. Thank you.
Okay. I'm standing here as the Prime Minister of the government team, and today's debate is about this House as Indonesians would force authority and power of incumbents into scientists and academics.
Can't hear. Can't hear. Can't hear. Can't hear.
We, as we can see in Indonesia, we are now currently led by authorities that not just focus on the health and not just the health problems that happening in our country, which is right now is the pandemic of the COVID-19, but our authorities also considering the things that not just about the health problems, which is like the economic states and politics states and etc. Which we can see that they're not focusing on they're not focusing on the health problems that we should focus on right now, which is the COVID-19 pandemic, but they define their focus on every other aspects as well. So we by considering the pandemic the pandemic of COVID-19 that is very hard to solve in this time of case, and the problems that the graphic of COVID-19 is still increasing over time, we want to change the authorities into the scientists and academics because of several reasons. For example, today when authorities are led by politicians these days, we can see that, for example, the loss of new normal system that is now really focusing on the health problems, and it just makes the graphic increase more and more each day. It is actually not focusing on the health problems itself and not solving anything. They just focus on the economic size, and people who don't really people who think that new normal is actually a normal thing to do. People think likely of pandemic situation, of the COVID-19 pandemic situation, and not really care about the health problems that they may occur using the new normal system, and how the law of physical distancing that are set by the government itself. So the goal is, by changing the authority to scientists, is going to make sure that the decision making are more effective due to the objectivity and the focus in hot problems, so that our country will be free from the pandemic state and do normal activities again. So by changing it to the scientists, we can make sure that the decisions making will be more objective, and then because they have more understandability with the case and how to solve the pandemic COVID and of the pandemic, and knows how to end this pandemic faster. So I'll be delivering arguments why we should change the authority to scientists. Furthermore, explain into my arguments, and then my second speaker will give out arguments about why changing the authorities to scientists can solve the pandemic, and how it can also maintain social stability. So proceeding to my arguments, why we should change the authority to scientists. So we can, as I said before, it can make the decision of our authorities more objective and more objective, and can solve the problems of of the pandemic faster and more efficient and more effective. Why? Because of course scientists are more capable and more known to help problems like this, for like the pandemic that we are dealing They of course use they use research, and they're more updated in medicines and how to take care of them, and they know how to focus what is much more important in right now for the country, which is the health problems that right now are increasing over time due to due to the new normal that has been set by the politicians that currently sitting in the authorities. And by changing it to the scientists, they know what is best for our country, which is focusing on the health problems. Also, countries that led by politicians didn't really focus on solving the health problems itself, and defies it by a new normal system. We can already see in Indonesia by uh, in the early of July, the new normal system is finally
Point.
finalized, and then we can see that the numbers of people who got infected by the COVID-19 is increased much more significant than before by using this the even the like law of physical distancing. We can see even by the law of physical distancing itself, the increased number of people who got infected by COVID-19 is still increasing. And by using or finalize the law of new normal, we can see that it is much more significant. The increasing is much more wide, and then you can see that but you can see that new normal is not really a good thing for our country, which is what we should focus on, is on the health problems itself. And we all know that new normal system is not a thing that focuses on the health problems. They said themselves that new normal is actually a thing to make sure that our economical space is not on is not decreasing, or the graphic is decreasing. So we can take a look at Korea too, that when they also doing the new normal system too in their country, and we can see that there's already an example of new normal system is not really capable of solving the health problems or the pandemic of the COVID-19 pandemic that's already happening now. It's just increasing the numbers of the graphics, numbers of people who got infected by the COVID-19, and didn't really solve the health problems that we should really focus on right now. And even before that, before the new normal system has been really finalized, we can see that the law of physical distancing is not really that hard, or um really that generalized or pushed by the government itself. The government itself doesn't really push the physical distancing that much, and then really focus on the law of physical distancing. So we can see by this motion why we strongly believe that this motion shall stand. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. What I think the most ridiculous thing that came out from opening government is that when they told us that politicians does not care about our people. Well, that's so funny, because if politicians doesn't care, then new normal wouldn't exist. That protocol wouldn't exist in the very first place, right, ladies and gentlemen? I think that is very ridiculous in the very first place. Furthermore, talk about when they told us that, Korea is very good at what they are doing right now, because at the moment that there is one case happening, they are going to shut down their country completely. Sure, I think that is going to be very sure. I think that there is an example that is ridiculous also, because notice that Indonesia and Korea is not the same. Notice that Korea have welfare and much more better technology in the very first place, hence why they are able to actually shut down their country. I think what I get from opening government is that basically they're going to accuse our politician as being an evil human being that doesn't care about the people at all. I'm going to prove why that is wrong in the very first place. what am I going to bring that in? What am I going to bring in my speech, right? I'm going to explain to you 4 points in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to explain why exactly as Indonesia and as Indonesian, what they're trying to do in this debate is going to work. Secondly, I'm also going to say why this is going to be even worse, because if they're going to oppose the current status quo. Thirdly, I'm going to explain to you the impacts and why our set of house is going to be much better under our set of house. But notice it in the very first place, right? I think that in the very first place, you should already realize that Indonesia is not Europe. We don't have a lot of capital, but we do have a lot of people. We do have a lot of territory, but we have small capital. That is the first world problem that exists under both sides of the house, right? I think that it is it's pretty damn obvious that in the current status quo, there's a lot of people who is still struggling to find food, right? I think that is pretty damn obvious in the very first place. But what is actually concerning in this debate is that when they told us that new normal doesn't do anything, I think that's wrong, right? Because I think that under opposition side of the house, or even in the current status quo, new normal exists for it to actually go hand in hand from people and their capital. Because if you're going to go under government side of the house, I think that it wouldn't work in the very first place. That is going to cause poverty in our society. I'm going to further explain it in my other substantive. But I think that in the current status quo, new normal is enough because we have mask, because we have hand sanitizer, and that's already a scientific basis, right? I think that is exactly why government promotes this, because it is scientifically proven that it's going to reduce corona in the very first place without actually making them go poor and cannot go to their works, or even those people who is outside of institutions, who needs to go everyone to actually gain money. I think that is what is concerning in this debate, because they wouldn't get money if new normal doesn't exist. But really talk about why under our side of the house, political approach and scientific approach is going to be different, right? I think if we're going to go under our side of the house, a political approach is what is exactly exists in new normal, right? People that is exactly what the political people is going to uh, promote in the very first place. Why do we think that this is going to be very good? Because I think that this is going to avoid panic, because political approach is able to actually handle stuff without giving the panic, or making people panic in the very first place. And why do we think this is bad? Because if you're going to go under because why do we think this is good? Because if we're going to go with political approach, it means that people is not going to be panic, and they're not going to do panic buying. Furthermore, I think that if we're going to go under scientists or like under government, I think that it is very obvious that scientists will only choose lockdown as their proposal, right? They're going to completely shut down the country in order for them to actually, be effective. Okay, sure. Let's talk about it in my third substantive, saying that I think that if we're going to I think that if they're going to argue that lockdown is very effective and this is going to shut down the corona suspects or victims in the very first place, okay, sure. But what they need to realize is that not a lot of people is able to actually afford their food when lockdown is happening, right? Only people who live in Padang Harum Hill, for example, or only people who live in Villa Tamara, for example, is able to do that. They of course they're going to be okay even if they don't get 3 months of allowance, for example. They have a lot of savings inside their bank account that is going to be fine, even if they're going to be locked down inside their luxury houses, because these people in the very first place doesn't actually have to go every day outside, or have to look at their working hour payment, because if not they are not going to be able to eat. I think that in the very first place, this is going to be also very good under us of the house, because if people are not panic, it means that people is not going to, for example, buying mask or surgical mask or M95, who is actually important for those frontliners, for our doctors or for our nurses who is fighting for us in the very first place. Furthermore, I think that scientists holds a lot of power, and if we're going to go under the government's proposal, it means that the scientists can refill actually, and they can do researches, and when they are going to refill that surgical mask or M95 is the most, is the most accurate or effective thing for you to actually protect yourself. This is going to be even worse, because people will most likely buy this even when they don't need it, right? I think that the people who need this the most, the actors who needs surgical mask and M95 the most, is those who is fighting for us in the hospital. What happens if we're going to use this under what happens under government of the house is that people is going to find a way to actually buy this and make the stocks for doctors and nurses go slow to the point where they don't have anything anymore. Hence why I think that is exactly why in the beginning of corona itself, a lot of people already, sell masks with crazy prices in the very first place. But talk about the impact itself, right? I think that what do we want as public health or as a country itself is that we want people to live, right? Sure, lockdown is effective, but another line of poverty is going to happen. I think that this is exactly why we don't want this to happen, because it means that those who is under the poverty line, those who needs to go every day selling their meatballs or nasi goreng, for example, are not going to be safe under this. Because even if they're going to say, oh, government give you allowance anyway, 600,000 a month, I don't think that that is enough for an individual, especially when you know that in Indonesia there's a lot of family with 4 or 5 kids, right? Or like 11 kids, like anyway, I don't know. I think that even if you're going to go under outside of the house, you're going to be okay anyway, because new normal exists, because protocol exists, and you're still going to be able to work and actually afford your livings with your family, for example. Okay, but let's take what they're going to say. For example, they're going to say, oh, what if the politician is that bad? What if the politicians are people who actually use the anggaran for unimportant stuff? Okay, but I think the check and balances exist from the society anyway. People like Dr. Tirta or Rachel Fenya, who is going to use their masses and actually for example, remind the government or even give them donations to the people and frontliners is going to exist. If government wants to win, they should guarantee how exactly small business can still run under the rest of the house without actually giving us another line of poverty and actually making people less and less every day. So proud to oppose.
Check. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. and Madam Speakers, we're not saying that as all of those things about economy, about business, we're not saying that thing. We do really care about that, and that's why, because we really care about it, because we know that the root of all this problem is the pandemic, we believe that the best way to solve it is by solving the pandemic from the very first place, because as soon as we finish this pandemic, we can continue our economy, we can get up stronger, rather than we stay with the status quo, with this kind of new normal that, we're still increasing in the graphics, and then our economics doesn't seem like having any growing any better at the moment, because not everyone is going out at the moment. So that it means that there is no demand and supply in the business. So it means that even though we're still running with this current status quo, we cannot get the maximum benefits from economics, and we're also losing in the health sector, ladies and gentlemen. So we believe that it is much better to solve the pandemic as soon as possible with the scientific approach rather than staying with the current status quo. So my further rebuttals will be integrated in my case. So firstly, I would like to talk about how to solve these pandemics, we can finish the pandemics as soon as possible with scientific approach, and how it would be the best scenario for our current situation. So here's the thing. Scientists works based by scientific data, based on the scientific knowledge and graphs and etc. Sure, the current government has already stated that and claiming that their decisions is based on that, but the problem is that these people that are on the health sector, they still not capable of making laws. They're not they just give their knowledge, but then their knowledge is not fully used by the government to take in terms of taking laws and decisions. And then the other thing is that if we're putting these people, that these scientists and then these doctors and things like that in charge, and then it means that we're really cutting off so many long bureaucracy process from like politicians and then the military, and then directly do decision. They can directly do things that could directly help the pandemic itself, rather than in the current status quo where those scientists are just used as like a source, like they're just saying, okay, this is the bad thing, this is the bad thing, but their knowledge is not being used by the government, and that's why our current situation is not going any better. So what's the problem here is that at the very first place, we choose new normal because we want the approach to make people become disciplined, right? We choose politicians, we choose militaries to make sure that the laws and the yeah, people can be disciplined because of the strict government. Happen right now is that none of that is ever happening. For example, in our city, those police or those people that are checking whether these people are using their protective equipments or not are
Point.
only, for example, in the Balikpapan and Samarinda and things like that. So it means that they're not effectively be used. So rather than we staying with the status quo, we're better off running to the scientists that have the knowledge and know what to do. For example, they can use the law to make sure that the government's money are attributed as much as possible to testing, because we know that the more people we test, the more people are known to be sick, then we can change, for example, those people that are sick, and those other people that are not sick can go out. So basically, if we know that everyone in the city, again, we can go to normal life. The scientific approach, because when we can maximize those things, when those people that are in science are in charge, they can do such decision, which is beneficial to both of the sides. To those who wants to continue run their business, they can continue it as fast as possible, as fast as possible after all people are being tested with COVID-19. That's just one example,
Point.
ladies and gentlemen. So that is my first argument, and then my second argument is about how it maintains social stability. So in this case, we know that in times of crisis, politicians are like they like to be denial. Okay, they're not the one that caused this whole pandemic, but they are the one that caused this pandemic is not over in our country, right? And they tend not to accept their faults. They tend to think that admitting a mistake means that when people who are politicians, who are military in charge, it means that it is less likely that they're going to change the current laws, even if they know that the current laws, the current they're making is not good. They're most likely not going to change. It will make their image become bad, and then they're scared that it would just seen as a form of weakness. While in scientists, when we're making a mistake and we're admitting it, it is a cornerstone of knowledge. Like people would say that, oh, so there's
Point.
it's like a jump point in knowledge. So we're going forward, ladies and gentlemen. That's why then we can maintain social stability and also for politicians and those military people that we put in the society. They have no background of science knowledge. So it means that whatever they say, whatever comes out from their mouth, can, for example, some predictive. They show us how that they're using their facial but not using their mask and things like that. So they're an example, they are a role model in our society, and by letting them in charge, it would cause a chaos in society. The society would be like they just can't believe what this government has done. They don't believe that the government is actually smart enough, or they know enough what they're doing here. So it will be harder for us to apply any decisions to make this COVID-19 resolve, ladies and gentlemen. So based on that, we're proud to propose. Thank you.
Hello, am I audible?
Iya Kak, audible.
Oke.
Yoi.
Okay. Madam Chair, it feels nice to live in a middle upper class family with 3-digit saving, but if even if you are fired or even if your business bankrupt, you do not care. You still have your saving. You can eat from that. It feels nice to not working a blue collar job. Therefore, you will not get fired because you have the necessary skills to survive in the capitalistic world. It feels nice to still able to pay high tuition fee in prestigious university regardless of the country's economic condition, regardless of many people got fired. Bantuan langsung tunai that happens in status quo only caters those who had a formal job who are fired. In Indonesia has a very unique characteristic which its economies resembles from many non-formal jobs. Take example of tukang bakso, tukang nasi goreng, tukang gudeg, or tukang gojek, for example. Of course, you elite academists will not care about these people for the sake of your elites healthy, ladies and gentlemen. You academists, scientists will disregard the new wave of poverty. We against that, we support the new normal. No, thank you. We're not sacrificing millions of blue collars for the health of certain elites. Two things I'm going to talk about. First issue I'm going to talk about, I will directly respond upon what if the case surges in our side, and secondly, I'm going to extend the case and what if the COVID become an endemic and it will live for in us forever. We think that the condition will be better with the new normal. Oh, but before going further, few points of rebuttals. Firstly, they say that scientists are experts at research, medicine, etc., and their consideration is not being used. But we question them. We think that the privilege that is given to the scientists is sufficient. The government already give funding to the research of the medicine and the technological advancement, for example. And the government has already take advice from the experts, which happens in status quo. They never mentioned to us, OG never mentioned why these approaches that the government make is not sufficient. And they say that the policy is not being used exactly because these experts only see the case on the perspective on disciplinary consideration. Only politicians are able to combine all people's interests, all disciplinary consideration. Only politicians are able to take both the public health and economic sectors of the pandemic. Therefore, we think that politicians are exactly better actors. Okay, they also mention on, oh, we are going to solve the pandemic better. But question, when PSBB, the most scientific method is MCO, or movement control order, or lockdown for health purposes, for example. How does that goes? The case still surges, ladies and gentlemen. And even worse, the case still surges and the economic cost was not even worth it, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, we believe that it does not solve the problem, and it gives more problem on the economic sector. First issue, they say that the cases will surge under our side of the house. Okay, we agree that current practice of the policy is not necessarily perfect, but the policy itself is good. It demands social distancing, it demands people to use masks and hand wash pretty often, and so on and so forth. And it is scientific enough. It based on WHO advice, guidance, and discovery. But what makes the case surges, ladies and gentlemen, it is ignorance. And take example of anti-mask protest in United States of America, or take example of not doing the health protocol when they are not being watched by the satpam or by the police, for example. Under our side of the house, no thank you. We would be happy to oblige the health protocol or increase the supervision from Satpol PP in the market, for example. We're going to be happy to do that. But okay, even in PSBB, it started with 14 days, 1 month, and then 3 months. What happens? What happens is the case still surges, ladies and gentlemen. Why does this happen? It's because poverty, ladies and gentlemen. Because poverty mindset. PSBB doesn't work because of this. For those people, for workers, for blue collar workers, it is better for them to die from coronavirus rather than their entire family die from poverty, ladies and gentlemen.
Here.
And those people, even in the movement control order, they still go out anyway, right? Gojek still takes your order. Non-formal jobs such as abang-abang tukang sate still also go out and sell in front of your house, ladies and gentlemen. And there are millions of them, ladies and gentlemen. And it is worse and it is worse in the previous MCO, because there was no health protocol policy, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, we think that PSBB or MCO will not work specifically in Indonesia with abundance of non-formal jobs, people which lives in poverty. But let's take the bullet that the case will surge under our side of the house. But it only lasts for 6 months. 6 months later, ladies and gentlemen. Why? A lot of vaccines are already in trial currently, ladies and gentlemen. Either from Oxford, from China, is already in trial. The cases will only raise to that extent. But what about the economy, ladies and gentlemen? The saving is privilege. UMR is based on the consideration of the sufficient amount to barely live, ladies and gentlemen. If their economic is being compromised, what will happen is they will start looting, ladies and gentlemen. This is what happens when poverty rises in 98, or this is what happens in Black Lives Movement. We are not going to go there. We are not going to diminish both public health and economy. We're going to protect both by creating new normal. But extension. What if the COVID-19 become an endemic and it will not go from the universe, for example, that it will live with us? That's a possibility on that. Read on WHO. That is exactly why we should start the new normal now, because policy requires trial and error, and the research and development is required for us to cope with this endemic. Research and development requires two things. Firstly, it needs trial. New normal provides the required data for you to consider what mask or technology is effective. Secondly, you need money for research and development. How do you make money? Manufacturers create products, for example, technology masks, etc., and it needs to be bought. Maybe only elites can use it now, but in the future, as the demand raises, the price will also go down. It is what all technology does, all the research does. We are and by that consideration, if the COVID become endemic, we will win. We will survive better. Proud to oppose.
Check. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so firstly, ladies and gentlemen, in today's motion that is with reference from the overall happening during COVID pandemic, this House as Indonesian would force authority and power of incumbents onto scientists and academics. Firstly, in this speech, ladies and gentlemen, I will explain to you the current condition of Indonesia, the capacity of politician and public figure, the quality of scientists, and the mechanism onto how exactly to pass that power, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, before I get to my argument, few rebuttals towards the opening opposition. Now, ladies and gentlemen, they have said that new normal based on science, we have hand sanitizer, we have masks, etc., etc. It is already enough to combat this pandemic, ladies and gentlemen. Now, with the current status quo, the case of Indonesia already reached 100,000, ladies and gentlemen, and therefore their points regarding the new normal is already doesn't work, is invalid, ladies and gentlemen. Now, secondly, they have said that politician handles panic better than the scientists, ladies and gentlemen. The replacement of scientists would be causing panic. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you that we have been in this pandemic since February, ladies and gentlemen, since March, and the number is 100K. And people are still ignorant, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of people are still not using their masks. A lot of people are still not doing physical distancing. Now, we believe, ladies and gentlemen, that a little bit of panic is good in this case, ladies and gentlemen. It will be good because no one in the politician, no one, the politician and the people has a sense of crisis that is in them. They don't know how exactly this pandemic going to ruin people's health. And in this type of cases, we prove that the point of opening opposition, that is, no, don't panic, don't panic. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is not enough to solve this, and even it's going to cause an ignorance even more, because people are told not to panic. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the third point that the opening opposition has brought to us, that check and balancing exists, and therefore we as the people can check and balance our politicians. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you again that people have a lot of expert has advised the politician, we should do lockdown, we should do lockdown, we should create a system to do this. Instead, the politician can keep postponing their action until check and balances is an illusion that the opening opposition is trying to create to you, ladies and gentlemen, and therefore their points is invalid. Now, let's get to the current condition of Indonesia. Firstly, many fail to do their job despite expert advice. How exactly so? Ineffective policy, ladies and gentlemen, such as PSBB or asal redoubled half effort to do lockdown, ladies and gentlemen. And the opening opposition also explained about bantuan langsung tunai, that disregard people working in middle lower class, ladies and gentlemen. But they do not say to you is that bantuan langsung tunai (BLT) is created by politicians, and therefore they only prove themselves that the politicians failed to do their job, ladies and gentlemen. So let's get to the current condition. Ineffective policy. The prakerja, ladies and gentlemen. Why exactly prakerja? We have 5 trillion rupiah, ladies and gentlemen, instead of doing giving it to our society, and therefore they could maintain their life even better. We give it to ruang guru, ladies and gentlemen. We spend it on some lessons that we do not need by something that is not qualified. Me knowing how to operate Microsoft Office does not solve the epidemic problem, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore, this proves to you that the current condition of Indonesia has already failed, and therefore we should try a new alternative. Now, the politician also, and now let's get to the capacity of politicians and public figure, and why they are not they should not be trusted with power in this condition, ladies and gentlemen. Their capacity, they are not an expert in health and epidemic handling or any other sector, ladies and gentlemen. They are just someone who has a lot of influence. Now tell me, the Ministry of Health, ladies and gentlemen, has a lot of, for example, politician often has conflict of interest between them and their political party, ladies and gentlemen, and therefore they cannot execute a certain policy goodly, ladies and gentlemen. They cannot do it effectively due to their political party's boundaries. And this type of boundaries will not happen in scientists and academics, ladies and gentlemen. And if we let it to the businessmen not only fix, they're not going to fix the problem because they are based on profit, ladies and gentlemen, and therefore they should not be trusted in this current condition. Now let me explain to you why exactly science. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me prove to you why exactly a politician has failed us. Firstly, the President Jokowi give a task for Prabowo, the Ministry of Defense, in handling our agriculture, ladies and gentlemen. And this belief and this prove to us that there are conflict of interest, ladies and gentlemen. They are not based on expertise and etc. And also the Luhut, the investment ministry, saying that Indonesia's condition is much better, and therefore, and a lot of another example, ladies and gentlemen, like Menteri Perhubungan saying that we will be cured if we eat nasi kucing, and this kind of capacity that they have a lot of influence, ladies and gentlemen. They're saying things not based on science, and therefore they should not be trusted. And the capacity of the scientists and academics, ladies and gentlemen, they are sworn by their occupation, they are expert in their field and not affiliated by any political party, and therefore they are freely to do their job. And now we would like to offer a certain mechanism. Firstly, we create a team of experts, not only in healthcare, by the way, that are not affiliated by any political party. And also, the current government personnel has to sign document that passes their duty onto said teams temporarily, ladies and gentlemen. And in these teams, they will discuss the policy that will benefit the health sector, but also does not negate the economic sector, ladies and gentlemen. And by this, we believe this motion should stand. Thank you.
Tes. Kedengaran?
Dengaran.
Okay. Okay, thank you for this opportunity. So before I'm going to explain my argument to you, so I'm going to review the argument stated from the member of the government. So he said earlier that the government actually has failed to solve the problem regarding to COVID-19. Well, actually, if the government actually has failed, then Indonesia probably now has already gone into the riot or even turmoil, just like what happened in India. Let me remind you that lockdown is not always going to be the answer, because as my colleagues have stated before, that there are a lot of people with different financial situation. Like not all people have like a secure job that will always give them money to buy all of the necessities to support their life. So we have to consider that. You have to consider from that perspective. So uh, so I'm going to explain much further about my argument. So if we force the authority and the power of the incumbents and public figures and businessmen onto the scientists and academics, it is actually does not guarantee. But my first argument does not guarantee that they would solve the COVID-19 much better than the government, as the proposition team thing. Because why? Because everyone, big scientists and academics has their own perspective of how to solve this problem based on their expertise, right? But also we shouldn't neglect, the perspective of from the government. Why? Because they know because they know the situation of what happened in Indonesia thoroughly. Then as Indonesia is has the
Point.
most populated, no thank you, the most populated people in the world, like the fourth rank, I guess, most ranked in four. Anyway, so to say that we have to give all this authority and power and have to neglect that economic sector, I think it shouldn't be the focus of giving that authority and power, because that is much more important thing rather than give the authority and
Point.
power, since scientists and academics has already have been given their own, as my colleague has said before, their own funding, their own power. We don't have to take off the power and authority from the incumbents. So that is my first argument. And the second argument is that the economic section will not be the focus of the scientists and academics, because all they think is how to solve this COVID-19 in a short amount of time. That we know that, as my colleague has said before, that we might going to live with this disease for as long as the human exists. So basically, we have to consider all of the sector of regarding to the situation, and the economic sector is much more affected because of this COVID-19. If the authority and power of the income is being forced onto the scientists and academics only, and forget about that economic factor, I think it will lead as what have been predicted, that Indonesia might fall into the economic recession that has been already being circulated recently. That all
Point.
other, even Japan, even South Korea has already fall into the economic recession. But okay, the point is that if we force all the authority and the thank you, the power of the incumbents projected to the scientists and academic, that does not going to solve the problem. It will only add another problem on top of another problem. I think that we should work hand in hand, just like my colleague has said before, to solve this problem. It's not about how will but who's going to solve this problem much better than the government, but it is much how we work together to solve the problem. And also it's not even going to guarantee that these people is not going to like abuse the power, as like stated in the proposition team, that's saying that politician or businessmen that is thinking a lot about their own motive, like profit and etc. I think both sides has their own the good and the bad side, the good and the bad. But the thing is that we shouldn't like neglect this, that these two sides has their own uh, authority and power in order to solve the COVID-19. So by forcing it, it's not going to solve any problem. But what we can do is just like what the government has already done, is that to give, a platform or whatever it is that like that specifically aim for scientists and academics in order to have to solve the problem regarding to COVID-19. I think that is all from me, and that is why we strongly oppose this motion. Thank you.
Am I audible? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tasalonika from the government team, and I would like to rebut and give a few arguments about the statements that each team has stated. And we need to remind you, first of all, that the debate is not whether or not we should do lockdown. This debate is about which people should be in charge. The politicians who are bound by political party, the one who has failed us since the beginning, or the scientific team, the neutral body with expertise in their own field. Because this kind of decision should be taken by scientists because we believe they are more qualified. Okay, to rebut the opposition team, the LO said that social distancing wouldn't be conducted if they don't care about the people. But the question is it enough? Is it enough to prevent the virus from getting spread? And second, they're concerning that Indonesia don't have enough capital, but that's not true. We can see the study case. Vietnam are way, I'm sorry for the lack of better words, but way poorer than Indonesia, but yet they listen to their researchers and experts because they have experts in medical factors in their ministry, and that we believe that, and the other LO stated that, sorry, public figures like Rachel Pena to advise to the government. What makes you think they will listen to her, a public figure, if they didn't even listen to the verified and official research that has already proven by scientific data? They are not being heard. And that's why we need to put proper people to the position of power so they can respond directly to heal the roots of the problem. And then that if the current government is focused on the economic aspect, we need to give task first so they can bring back our economy again. Thus, we urgently needed to use scientific approach, and people with these backgrounds are needed to replace them for greater good as a repressive and false prevention action. And then politicians, we believe that politicians mainly think about economics and less about the solution of the virus and the general society's health, seen as the decisions that they have been making until now. The ministers
Point.
these days, the ministers these days don't focus on supplying medical supplies and facilities and conduct research properly, yet they give requests and not scientific statements to comfort people. This is a matter of human rights, that if a mass of people people are dying and lack of medical facilities, especially in, say, rural areas, the ministers that aren't scientific or has medical field doesn't pay attention to this. And then the next, the DLO stated that government gave funding and took advice from scientific. How is this true? Yet why are we seeing the Ikatan Dokter Indonesia to demand or beg Indonesia's government to take action? Whose advice are they listening to? And this even emphasized why we need experts in their field to be in the position of power so they know from the first hand and not making decisions blindly without knowing the basics of medical field, ladies and gentlemen. And then the MO stated that if the government fails, there will be riots. This is such a ridiculous statement to make because aren't the economic crash isn't enough for you? It's not enough. Do we have to have riots first to so that we can take this seriously? That is really ridiculous. And we need to place the position of power to scientific so they can be the decision maker. That's what I'm trying to say. And then new normal isn't
Point.
enough and not scientific enough. And just like my previous team stated that politicians are bound to have personal conflicts, politicians don't give the elaborate and importance of medical treatments and the danger of this coronavirus properly, thus making people underestimate this pandemic. Why? Because they can't explain it better to the general people. Why? Because then again, it's not their field. And are we forgetting the fact that politicians are very biased on their political views that would lead them to have biased decisions to, I don't know, making in their favor.
Point.
And that, so the baseline, if this motion passed, everyone in the ministry is consisted of scientists and academics. And why we do need that? Because pandemic is a chaos condition which could make people do or make decisions on impulse. And if we're not taking off the power of people who doesn't qualify as the decision maker, this would lead to even more chaos. And second, capability. The job positions that they're in allows them to make laws just like how they studied. So they are also the researchers as someone who's professional in the field. The incumbents that placed not in the right position would make reckless decisions and influenced by their personal interests and not scientific statements like makan nasi kucing to, I don't know, heal coronavirus. And then scientists and academics are sworn by their professions as the scientists and academics. So even if there are places in the place of power, they should still have the obligation to keep their vow. Businessmen and public figures aren't responsible for their misconduct and they don't have the profession vow that they have to keep, unlike the scientists and academics that they have to sworn their life to for the greater good of people. They need to heal people in the for their humanity, and they don't have. And yet businessmen and public figures aren't responsible for their misconduct, and they don't have the moral obligation on responsibility as they're not an expert in their field, so they don't have that vow to. And that's why we're linking back that this is why this motion should stand and would be very beneficial and urgently needed. Thank you.
Uh, okay. I would like to summarize. I would like to summarize the statement from opposition team. But before that, uh, I'm gonna say that there are a lot of people suffer and struggle for life because of this virus, and we all know that. But health problem is not only the problem on this situation, and the government knows that and realized about that. There are a lot of consideration before making the policy. Government has their own role, either do the scientists and academics, but they may work together, but not to force and power off the incumbents onto scientists and academics. Lockdown has become the most violent solution, but have you ever think about the people that are suffering and struggle to fulfill their necessity? You know, we heard a lot from the people that they are better die because of this virus than let their family feel hungry at home. They want to work to fulfill their necessity, family feel better in this pandemic. And we can see from the policy or wisdom that making by the government, the new normal, social distancing, on all these protocol are based on the scientists and academics. So it doesn't prove that government didn't care about the health problem. Once again, that the government has duration before making the policy, before making the wisdom, before and also we're talking about 200 million side didn't mention about the specific solution or using scientific approaches, but didn't mention
Point.
the specific way and saying that we need to do the lockdown and anything. Is it a new normal enough for us and social distancing enough for us? I said
Point.
that the government is not only seeing by the health problem, but only seeing from the economic side, like the speaker of opposition before. They only explain about all of these things from the economic side, from the health problem side, because Indonesia is a wide territorial, and we have a lot of people, and all those people are also suffering, also struggle. If we do that solution that they say is lockdown, then how about the people who are suffering, even just for food? They have the people that have to work that day, and that they give the result what they get to their family. So yes, sure, health problem is the main problem, but it's not only that. And once again, I said that the government knows the situation of this country, and there's a lot of consideration, whether it's from health problem and whether it's from economics, law, and everything, before them making policy and making wisdom. So that's why we can't force authority and power of incumbents onto scientists and academics, because the government and the scientists or academics also have their own roles, and they may work together but not force the authority and power off. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Can't hear. Reflection.
Tasha, are you here?
Iya, Pesa.
Yes.
Okay, so here's the thing. I see that today's debate kind of average debate, I guess. Somehow because both of you, all of you guys can engage one each other, at least most of you guys, and eventually can touch the spirit of the motion today, which we are going to decide which actor going to be the best actor to take the authority of our country to face this kind of problems that we see. And based on your debate today, I would like to show you the rank of this debate. We give the fourth rank to the closing opposition. The third is opening government. The second is opening opposition. And the first is closing government. Congratulations. But these are the explanation. Why we put the closing opposition as the fourth rank? Because we see that actually they don't have any authentic or original idea to support their stance to oppose this motion today. We see that actually almost all of your argumentation are repetitive or something they already explained by the opening of opposition. Next, why we put the opening government as the third rank for today's debate is that because a lot of your argumentation is such kind of assumptive on how you try to explain that politician kind of actor that don't want to admit their mistakes, so that the society suddenly cannot believe on their decision or stuff, and finally will impact into the successness of the program they try to apply inside of the COVID-19 program itself. And why we put the opening opposition as the second rank is that we see the opening opposition is upper hand than the opening government. Is that because they have a brilliant idea on how that when the opening government said that actually in today's status quo, a lot of the scientists perspective not never become the consideration of the government, so that they try to give this motion today, but finally the opening of opposition tried to show us that actually there are such kind of check and balance system and stuff that actually can take down the argumentation. They become the root of argumentation from the opening government in the very first place. And also why finally we put the closing government at the first place is that we see the closing government the only one that can touch the essence of the actor that exists into this debate on how actually the closing government try to give the real characteristic of politician, for example, on how they have a lot of influence and they are considered with the political parties' interest, for example, which this kind of things very problematic, can influence the decision and stuff. We see that actually on how the opening of the closing government can catch a lot of example, or even the case of the opening opposition, for example, the LT or even the lockdown, the SDD and stuff. They actually all of them are also the output of the politician at the very first place, make showing us that actually the main actor that cannot be trusted as the very first place to solving this problem goes to the scientists and the academics. So based on this explanation, we believe that the closing government is supposed to be the first one. And if you guys have any question related with the results, you can ask the judges here and also get your PA here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kak.
Oke, sebelumnya untuk PA-nya ini saya akan serahkan ke Kak Pipit dan Bu Santi. Soalnya habis ini saya harus tabulasi nilainya, gitu ya. Makasih.
Ini prosedur PA.
Closing government sama opening deh Kak. Kalau yang lain nggak tahu gimana.
Iya, kalau misalnya ada urusan terus ya.
Will there be another round for today?
No, it's only 2 rounds.
Oh ya, oke, thank you. Besok lanjut lagi setengah
Oke.
9 ya, Kak?
Yes.
Iya betul, besok lanjut lagi 8:30.
Thank you, Kak.
Sama-sama, Dek.
Yes. Tapi bisa padahal 3 ronde hari ini ya, cuman jangan ya. Ada saya duluan kah ini?
Boleh, boleh.
FK ya?
Boleh Kak Pipit.
Dari FK dulu yang Prime Ministernya Dava. Nah, kalau dari overall speech kamu, saya lihat itu banyak sekali repetisi. Maksudnya kamu udah ngomong di awal, pas di argumen kamu ulang lagi yang kamu omongin. Contohnya, di awal-awal, in your early speech, you mention about how the policies made by the incumbent lean more to the economic such as new normal which resulted into the rise of the cases. Ini kamu bawa lagi ke argumen di bawahmu. Argumen di bawahnya juga sama isinya, that how many of the policies lean more towards the economic rather than the health sector. Terus yang on your early speech you also mention on how scientists and academics would create a better decision making because they understand the pandemic better. And then you mention it again in your arguments. Jadi substansimu tuh kurang contributive because mostly you only repeat what you have mentioned before during your 7-minute speech. I think it will be even better if you try to think harder and explain your claims more rather than only repeating statement from one statement, ntar agak lama diulang lagi statementnya, ya. Things like that, and become more kayak lebih tajam aja sih ngelihat kira-kira di opening opposition bakal ngomong apa, karena opening opposition itu sudah banyak ngasih preemptive arguments gitu loh, kayak misalnya mereka mencoba menyiapkan bagaimana kalau mereka diserang bagaimana kalau akan terjadi endemic and so on and so forth gitu kan ya. Nah, maybe you can also as a prime minister, I think it is even better if you could preemptive the arguments which will be most likely coming from the opposition side of the house. Itu from Dava. Meanwhile from a Green, you're saying that finishing the pandemic quicker is better to help the economy recover soon. Like some of your claims, most of your claims need support. The support can be in form of examples in contextual situation. Jadi kayak kalau kamu ngomong kalau finish pandemic quicker itu bisa help economy recover soon. Contohnya apa misalnya? Terus you also mention on how new normal does not do not give maximum result whether in economy and health. Kasih contohnya gimana sih new normal ini memang berusaha menyelamatkan ekonomi, they're trying to save the economy, but they're not helping really well as well. Contohnya apa? Ya, you also don't give a very convincing examples on that claim, and then you were also trying to explain on how you're trying to characterize the politicians and scientists. Ada upaya untuk mengkarakterisasi politicians and scientists, but your effort in this characterization is not enough because it tends to be assumptive. Itu lebih cenderung ke assumptif karena nggak ada contoh langsung dari klaimmu. Misalnya kamu bilang your claim says that politicians tend to not want to admit their mistakes, and it is not good for handling the pandemic situation, right? But where's the example? Kan contohnya gimana dan bagaimana ini terjadi repetitively. So we cannot consider that as a whole argument because masih assumptif sekali. You also mention on how scientists tend to be okay admitting mistake rather than politician, ya sama masih agak assumptive. So okay, Miss Santi, aman, thank you. Jadi having a good claim is not enough, but you also need the example, kayak example kontekstual, penjelasan kontekstual dari klaimmu itu sangat penting banget. Kalau nggak, cuman jadi kayak kalimat bagus yang mengawang-awang aja. Ya, I think it's that. One thing that, tapi masih cukup kontributif sih di opening government dibandingkan di closing opposition tadi, karena kalian masih ada ngomong kayak bagaimana funding allocation-nya will be better, karena misalnya mereka kan will do more testing, isolating only the infected, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So you contribute more to debate, that's why you can apprehend your opening opposition. Itu sih kayaknya, jadi try to avoid assumptive arguments, find more example, contextual explanation, gitu-gitu. Sementara kalau untuk ini Reinhard dengerin apa enggak ya?
Yes, I'm listening.
Oh, you're listening. Oke, berarti saya masuk juga. Tapi Tata itu kosong, kayak tanda seru gitu.
Iya.
Berarti nggak ada dia.
Nggak apa, nanti tak kasih ini.
Oh iya, oke. Kalau di OO tadi itu yang saya dengar adalah gini. Dari Tata dulu apa dari Reinhard dulu ya? Tata ini saya jelaskan juga, Reinhard apa nggak usah? Apa langsung ke kamu aja?
Terserah nggak apa, kan kalau Tata case kan, ya sekalian tak tulis aja, nanti tak bilangin ke Tata.
Oh, oke. Kalau Tata itu tadi dia nyuruh.
Gimana?
Sorry, ke-mute. Iya, silakan Tata.
It's okay.
Thank you so much for the feedback.
Yes, you're welcome. Oh iya, argumennya Tata itu ini argumennya Tata sama Reinhard terus ini agak nyambung-nyambung aja kan ya. Many citizens cannot afford being in lockdown, government allowance is not enough. Sebenarnya argumennya sih sudah nggak apa-apa, cuman ya sayangnya sudah di-rebuttal duluan sama si member of government. Kayak bagaimana Tata waktu bilang political approach itu works karena di avoid panic, itu juga di-rebuttal udah sama si Fabian tadinya. Mungkin lebih ke menjelaskan bagaimana which parts of politician, quality apa dari politician yang benar-benar eksklusif, yang nggak bisa dialihkan ke saintis sama academics. Mungkin tadi tim kamu, Reinhard, ada ngomong bagaimana academic can only consider one discipline only. Sementara kalau politician can consider multidiscipline, which is better for the citizen kan ya. Tapi ini tidak disertai dengan contoh konkret dan kontekstual yang membuat saya convinced bahwa this is the case gitu loh. Soalnya si closing government itu ada bawa beberapa contoh ineffective policies coming from the politicians yang mana hasilnya malah blunder and not very effective in handling the pandemic. Mungkin bisa ya itu yang bikin kuat banget gitu loh dari closing government, kenapa kamu nggak bisa upper hand mereka, karena kok saya rasa karena kurang di situ. Terus hati-hati when you're saying that when Reinhardt itu ada ngomong bagaimana ini adalah new normal ini merupakan bentuk yang mana nantinya akan mensupport research and development which requires trial and error to handle things to prevent the endemic to happen. Nah, no one noticed this, but one of the adjudicator kayak notice bahwa loh ini kan berarti mau ngorbanin orang dong jadi bahan trial dan error. But luckily no one noticed that. Tapi makanya karena nggak ada yang notice dan nggak ada yang ngeribat ini, makanya kamu masih lebih upper hand dibandingkan opening government. But be very careful when you are making arguments. Your argument can sound more diplomatic, kayak lebih kelihatan baik aja gitu loh.
Terus harusnya framingnya gimana, Kak? Kan ada nih isu bahwa COVID-19 can be an endemic, kalau bahwa kita semua emang pada akhirnya akan harus berdamai. Terus harusnya framingnya gimana supaya tidak evil sounding?
Tidak evil sounding, mungkin bisa di framing bagaimana contohnya kalau misalnya nih, gimana ya framingnya ya? Di citizens of Indonesian-nya, misalnya kayak citizens of Indonesians ini coming from very different background, beda, mereka ini betul-betul pluralistik dan heterogeneous sekali dibandingkan negara yang lain gitu kan ya. Dan tingkat tingkat kepatuhannya juga berbeda-beda. Pun misalnya kita mau mendengarkan scientist and academic, terus kita mau lockdown misalnya, kita tidak bisa menjamin bahwa itu yang akan benar-benar dilaksanakan juga oleh si masyarakat ini pada awalnya. Jadi in either case, di case di mana kita mendengarkan scientist and academics, sama di case di mana kita still put the incumbents, kayak still put the government official as the one in power, di antara dua kasus itu, dua-duanya itu juga respon masyarakat mungkin tetap akan sama. Jadi mendingan sekalian aja di kayak yang dilakukan sama pemerintah sekarang, paling enggak masih bisa diregulasi, masih bisa diawasi daripada mereka diam-diam gitu.
Cuman kan Kak, itu proves kalau scientist leadership bakal sama. Tapi kan yang waktu tadi aku mau extend adalah what if COVID-19 become an endemic? Kan kita tetap harus research development. Gimana caranya bawa argumen research development without saying that we will sacrifice people?
Gitu. Susah sih. Tapi kenapa memang harus kamu bawa argumen research and development ini?
Biar poinnya habis di opening.
I see. Right, it doesn't really matter. Kalau misalnya research and development is needed, memang research and development ini works-nya gimana? Apakah harus ada yang terkena dulu baru? Ya, kayak mungkin perlu kamu jelaskan juga, research and development can only works if this kind of situation happen. And to prevent endemic to happen, ya, kayak ini mungkin lebih ke karakterisasi penjelasan aja sih, kayak kamu jelaskan bagaimana research and development could only happen if certain requirement is being fulfilled. Baru kamu jelaskan requirement-nya apa supaya bisa research and development itu happen. And this could only happen in the scenario of this gitu kan ya. So we think our scenario will be better in handling the possibility of endemic to happen rather than the scenario brought by the government. Mungkin gitu kayaknya, lebih detail. Maybe you could do more detail in characterizing ya di research and development stuff. Pun
Thank you,
anyway
Kak.
juga ya oke. Member of government pertama Hafian tuh